What's up, guys? How are you guys doing today? It is a beautiful day here in South Carolina. It feels wonderful outside. It's not too hot, not too cold. My son and I have been in the garden laying down some more compost on these beds, and I got my soil test results in, and I wanted to share it with you guys. If you are not new here, you know that these beds right here, where there's a break right there, these were 3x6 beds, and my son elongated them for me so that they would be 15 feet beds, because I realized I liked the longer beds better. So in the middle, to fill it, I just added straight compost. That is compost from our local landfill. And so I took 3 soil samples. I took one just from the straight compost, which is the middle of these beds, and then I took a soil sample from the log raised beds, and then a sample from just different places in these woodside beds, including this in-ground bed right here, because that also I used the same soil there that I did in these raised beds. So for the first soil test, which was just a straight compost, the pH was 8%. I'm going to put like a screenshot of the sample or the results that I received. The pH was 8%, and it had excess amounts of sodium, calcium, phosphorus, and potassium. You'll see it right there. And so I called them, and they said that in order to lower the sodium inside the compost area, even though I wasn't going to plant straight into that compost, he said that it would be hard for anything to grow in there, which I told you guys that on the website it tells you on the Charleston composting, like Bees Fairy, whatever, it tells you not to grow straight into the compost because it doesn't have all like, it's not a full nutrient, it doesn't have everything. And since they get most of their greenery from restaurants mixed with wood, that created high sodium levels. So when I spoke to somebody at Clemson, they said in order to combat that, just add lots or water those beds really well to kind of wash away the sodium. I'm not planting in them until the spring, and I did tell him that I was going to mix the compost beds with other material, but I just want to see what was just like a baseline of the compost that we received from Bees Fairy here in Charleston. The second soil sample that I sent was from these log raised beds. Right now they're covered, but there's 8 log raised beds up here, and I just took a little bit from each raised bed, and I will put that on the screen. That also had high, if I'm not mistaken, you'll see it on the screen, phosphorus and potassium, and maybe would have excess phosphorus and potassium if I'm not mistaken, and then like high calcium, I believe, and that soil pH was 7.1. It's super windy here today, but yes, that soil pH I believe was 7.1, but like I said, I'll have a screenshot of the results right here on the screen for you, and you'll be able to see exactly what it was. When I first, the guy was asking me what I put on these beds, and I was telling him that I used, when I first built these beds 2 years ago, a mixture of compost, topsoil, peat moss, worm casting, azomite, and then I added in lots of bone meal and blood meal because I didn't soil test before I planted, and I was growing onions in that bed and stuff like that. And so again, he told me that I didn't have to add any like bone meal or anything. The only thing I would need to add is nitrogen, and I didn't know that soil tests actually do not show you how much nitrogen is in your soil because it goes away so fast. And so that wasn't on the soil test, but with everything else being so high, I was like, I wonder what the nitrogen would have been. So going forward, I'm just going to top dress these beds with I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I might as well, like, I've been buying compost for the last, since I built these beds, so like last year and this year, to top dress the beds because these are no dig beds. But with the compost being so high and excessive in potassium and phosphorus and calcium, and having a high pH, he told me that he wouldn't worry too much about my pH. The log raised beds, one was 7.1, and then the wooden raised beds was like 7, if I'm not mistaken. And if you're familiar with like pH and like what vegetables like to grow and what pH. I would like my pH to be a little lower, and so I could add peat moss to lower the pH, and he said there's other things that I could do to lower the pH, but that's gradually over time. I would have to like add that stuff now and let it sit. And I do have like a half a bag of peat moss inside of my hoop house, but and so I might, you know, end up getting some more and then just adding that throughout the beds, and then retest my soil in spring after I know that I'm finished like amending them, and just see if those numbers kind of decreased. I don't want them in the excessive because and he said it's not really good, like it's almost in like the danger zone, which is not really good for any plant. And so yeah, I might like just amend once I get all of these beds filled and top dressed. He also said another way that I could lower those numbers was not getting topsoil, but like fill dirt and mixing that in with my existing soil, because fill dirt doesn't have any nutrients, and since I have excessive amount of nutrients, I don't know if I'll do that, but that was a suggestion for me, just because fill dirt doesn't have any nutrients and I have excess amount of nutrients. And so he was saying that, you know, even topsoil has nutrients, and so adding topsoil wouldn't be a good idea. And I'm like, I wish I'd have known that before. I've been top dressing these beds with compost, which is like I think $40 or $42 a yard, and fill dirt's like $26, and even topsoil is like $32. But you know, I'm so glad that I got, and it was way easier to do the soil sample than I thought, and I did it right. And so I'm definitely going to do it again once I do all his suggestions. The third soil sample that I sent, like I said, was from these wooden side raised beds. And again, it didn't have, in the wooden side raised beds, it didn't have excessive amounts of calcium. It just had high phosphorus and potassium. And he said the pH, he thought, you know, he would leave that alone. But again, excessive amounts. So he said not to add any of those things, which kind of sucks because I have a bunch of fertilizer, and the fertilizer is like a NPK, and so it does has phosphorus and potassium in it, and he recommended, and I also would know not to use it, because with excess amounts I don't want to add more of those things, which takes harder to deplete. Another suggestion he said was that I could have planted a cover crop, but he said it's kind of late for that in the season. But he said that would have been a good idea to plant a cover crop, because, and then pull everything out, including the roots, and not till it back in, or, you know, put it back in, because with it being excess amounts, I want to pull all that nutrients out of the soil, which seems, you know, not beneficial. But in my case, when there's excess amounts of potassium and calcium and phosphorus, it makes sense that he would say plant something that, and then pull it out and, you know, not use it. In all, I'm really excited that I did the soil test, because I would have never known, and I would have just been adding more phosphorus and potassium, and even calcium, because there's like fertilizers that I have that are specific for tomatoes, and it's because it has calcium in it, and I would have been adding those things to my garden, not really realizing that I had excess amounts of those things already in my soil. When they send you the soil test results, they give you recommendations, and mine's gave me recommendations, but it had it in the inorganic recommendations. And so when I called, the guy gave me the organic recommendations of adding blood meal, and he told me that that takes a while, and so she's like, I just put those boxes down and she wants to come mess them up. But he told me that how much, I think it was like 8.5 pounds of blood meal for 1,000 square feet. And but he said that I would, you know, need to like start putting that down now, because it takes a while to get into the soil. And then I also asked him about adding fish emulsion, because I have like a 5-gallon bucket of fish emulsion, and he gave me the recommendations on that. And so now that I have that in my head, I know that I would need to be on a regimen of like every 2 weeks or whatever, you know, whether watering with a light fish emulsion or something of the sort, like adding blood meal now and then adding, you know, fish emulsion as the growing season goes by. So with this information, I'm going to get all the soil laid down, which we actually just finished getting all of the soil that we had in our pickup truck laid down, but we still have like the 8 log raised beds, and then we have the cross that we didn't do. So that's 8, 9, 10, 11. We still have 11 beds that we need to top dress. And once I get them top dressed, right before I plant in them in the probably about March, I want to say, probably February or March, I'm going to retest my soil and see if I've gotten any of those soil, like those excessive numbers, to come down. That will also give this soil time to settle. Right now all of the beds are filled, but once it rains, like we didn't squish it down or anything, so once it rains it will settle. That's what happens when we've filled with compost. So we filled these beds multiple times, and once it rains, the compost kind of settles. And so we'll see once it rains and stuff just how, you know, much, if anything, that we need to add. I probably won't add any more soil. I was just editing the portion of this video that I shot in my garden earlier today, and as I was listening, I forgot to say the guy who did my soil test had said that in the coastal regions of South Carolina, that a lot of people, he said most people do have excess amounts of potassium and phosphorus already in their soil, and that's why he was asking me what amendments have I been adding to my soil, because he said in the coastal region, he asked what region I was from, and said that they find in soil samples from the coastal region just topsoil alone has high potassium and phosphorus in it already. He didn't say why that is. He just said it was because it was the coastal region. They just find that, and so I don't know what being close to the, you know, the coast has to do with that, but it was definitely interesting to know that information, because I was just thinking about my previous garden, which was more inland, and so it was more to the coast than I am even now, and I used the same things that I'm using now, the same compost. I didn't even use topsoil, and I added basically the same things. The only difference is I didn't add any topsoil mixture when I built my previous garden. I used either bag soil, the compost still from the landfill, and you know, I used black cow. I did use mushroom manure and peat moss, and so a lot of the same things, worm castings, azomite, but the difference is here I did use topsoil, but knowing that even the compost by itself still had those excessive amounts of potassium, calcium, and phosphorus, and then even the beds that I had, you know, mixed with topsoil also had those excessive amounts. It's just yeah, he said as long as I can get that sodium level down in just that compost mixture, he's like he doubts like anything would be able to really grow healthy with having excess sodium. And then I had been looking up, just researching what does like excessive amounts of potassium and phosphorus like do, and it was saying that it like makes it harder to like take up micronutrients like magnesium and zinc and stuff like that. And so I do really hope that those numbers can come down. I do have some onions coming in January that I'm going to plant, and those are root crops, and those like you know, like bone meal, which I don't need, which would be the phosphorus. So even stuff like that, I would have added more phosphorus to my soil when I planted my onions, because the previous 2 years I've added phosphorus to my soil to like bulbing things, thinking that, you know, that they needed some phosphorus, not even knowing that I had excessive amount. So maybe now that I know, and I won't be adding any more phosphorus for this whole next year, maybe by even if it only lowers a little bit in spring, maybe by next fall when I soil test again, it can lower even more if I'm not adding any more phosphorus, like whether organic or even inorganic fertilizers, which I haven't used inorganic fertilizers, but I'm not going to be adding anything, is what I'm saying. And then maybe that can lower to a reasonable amount. If you hear a baby in the background, that is a baby. I'm watching my friend's daughter, and we are at my daughter's tumbling class. And I was editing this video and realized that I didn't tell you guys about that. He said that soil that comes from the coastal region is high, and I wanted to share that information because that is important. And he also asked if I had raised beds, and I said yes. And so that soil, even though I had topsoil, it was topsoil that was obviously harvested from coastal regions here in the coastal South Carolina area as well. Even though I wasn't using my own topsoil, these are no-till beds, and so I haven't tilled these beds. I just kept adding soil on top. Anyway, now I am finished, and I will have to see you guys in my next video. Bye.